Cliff the Rocket Man here again. Video 14. Yesterday I did a video on how to get your mower ready for spring, kind of a spring tune-up. But I thought I ought to take it just a step further. And what if it doesn't start? Yeah, there's a few things that would cause that, but I'm just going to stick with one today. Maybe I'll do another video on how to diagnose other problems with them. But it seems like most of the problems with carburetors or with mowers, and that includes tillers, snow blowers, string trimmers. String trimmers are generally, somebody gives me one, they go directly into the trash. They're not generally worth fixing. Maybe a nice still. And I don't mind working on chainsaws too. But most of the problems are carburetor related, so we're just going to do that today for simplicity. I've got 4 carburetors here. A Tecumseh, Briggs & Stratton, Kohler, and a Honda carburetor. So I'll kind of give you a quick let's see, what would you say, view of how to fix them. So I'm going to use the Briggs & Stratton carburetor because it's the simplest. So okay, if, say for example, if your lawnmower, you put some fresh gas in it in the spring and it won't start, you hit the primer button and it'll run for a couple seconds and then quits. On a Honda, they don't generally use a primer button. They use a choke. You pull the choke and it runs for a couple seconds and then it quits. That's more than likely carburetor related. You can also try some another way to diagnose the problem is use a little starter fluid. If it'll run on the starter fluid then quits, that kind of eliminates most problems. That means you need to start looking at the carburetor. Now, Briggs & Strattons and Tecumsehs are fairly simple. You get into the Hondas and the Kohlers. They are much trickier. They use more gaskets and heat shields, more levers. So if you're not really mechanically inclined, don't have many tools, then maybe you should just invite your buddy over there to help you out with it. Or last case scenario, you take it to your lawnmower shop. But anyway, on Briggs & Strattons, usually it's caused, or by most mowers, it's caused by bad fuel. And ethanol fuel is the worst offender over the winter. Sometimes if the fuel goes bad, and you're going to have to look inside the carburetor. Now, what I have done in the past, sometimes I have a little contest with myself to see how quickly I can fix a problem with a no start on a lawnmower. A lot of times what I'll do, first, right off the bat, if the gas smells kind of stale in the mower, I'll drain it out of the tank. I'll drain it out of the tank, and then what I'll do is I'll just crack my lower bolt, or actually this is a jet on a Briggs & Stratton, let it drain a little bit of the fuel off, stick it back on there, flip the mower back over. If you've got it on its side, I actually do them from the side so I can get to the bolt. So these are all, all these are for vertical crankshaft, but it kind of works the same way with a horizontal crankshaft. The carburetors work the same. So anyway, and if that doesn't, I'll tighten up my nut, let a little bit of fuel back into the carburetor again, and it still won't start. Then I start looking a little deeper into the carburetor. Now, I generally will pull them off, carburetor cleaner and some air compressor, some compressed air, I should say, and I go to town with them. Now, I'm going to try to point all the little problem areas for you. This is a Briggs & Stratton jet, and you notice you've got a hole here and a hole here. Let's see, now let's put this where you can see it, and a hole here. There's one on the other side. Now, if it hasn't been sitting for too long, more than likely you just got a little piece of junk in the jet. All it would take is some carburetor cleaner and some compressed air. You can clean that jet out. A lot of times that'll fix them. Now, if that doesn't work, the carburetor is pretty gummed up. You need to spray it down with carburetor cleaner. Really paying close attention to orifices, because how a carburetor works is it draws fuel and it draws air. Well, it draws fuel through, or air through the throttle. Here's the throttle, but it requires air to allow the carburetor to draw fuel, because the fuel's in the bottom of the carburetor. It has to be able to, the air rushing past the venturi here will actually draw fuel up. Well, if you've got it, if it's plugged up here, which I don't know if you can see it, there's just two little holes down in there. It's not going to draw fuel. Now, one thing, I'm going to get off topic for just 1 second. If you've got fuel in the gas tank and you pull the bowl off and the float is stuck, what it has is a jet. So if it's got no fuel in the carburetor, if it's like this, maybe the first place you should look is for an obstruction right here, or here. There's just on Briggs & Stratton, there's just a little rubber seat down in there, and the float goes up and down and adds fuel to the carburetor when it needs it. So anyway, there's one problem. I talked about the jet. Looking down in here, now just as important is this is a vent for the float bowl, and this is for your pilot jet right here. Now, Briggs & Stratton, they don't really use a pilot jet. They just use this small little brass bushing in here, and they just poke a hole in it. Now, this particular hole is for, this tells me this is for a primer button. That also clean that out by carburetor cleaner and then a little bit of air. Now, to help me figure out where it's plugged up, you can use carburetor cleaner and make sure you follow what I do. And this is a poor example of that. Maybe I'll look at the Tecumseh. If you follow where the air and the fuel go, like this would be an airport here, and this is where the fuel comes up through the venturi. And it uses the same type of system as the Briggs & Stratton, if you notice. It has two holes on the bottom, hole here, hole on the opposite side, and a hole here. This is actually the metering jet right here. This is how it meters the fuel. Now on Tecumseh, they throw a fourth hole in there, and I don't know if the camera is going to show this bugger, but I'm going to point it out. It's right there. A lot of people, this hole can be missed. It's just, it's actually drilled diagonally through there. Be sure and get that on them. Now, there's, say if it starts, but it surges, and you can pump the primer button on a Briggs & Stratton and Tecumseh's, or close the choke on a Tecumseh snowblower, and it smooths out, then that means it's partially plugged. Now, to fix that is, and I'm not going to pull it out here, this is called a pilot jet. The Briggs & Stratton just uses a bushing with a very teeny hole drilled in it. Tecumseh actually uses a pilot jet. Now you can thread this out, and the hole is so small in it you won't be able to put stick a piece of wire in it to clear it. So you use carburetor cleaner and air. Okay, now on Hondas, their pilot jet is beneath this screw, and it's actually a bushing that's pressed into the carburetor. You can't remove it, but this gives you access to it. Make sure that is clear. That usually that being plugged, what's happening is it's not allowing enough air into the fuel stream from here up to the venturi tube, which is right in the center of the carburetor. Okay, this is the choke side, just to help you orient yourself a little bit to it. This is the choke side, so this is a Honda lawnmower carburetor, and then here's the throttle side of the carburetor. Now this particular carburetor is off a Kohler engine, and they do it just slightly different. Honda does have this type of carburetor too. What you do is you pull out this stop screw for idle, and then here is your pilot jet right here, and it just has a little teeny hole in it. It's the same thing. So Tecumseh, Hondas, and Kohlers use the pilot jet. Make sure that's clear too. That will generally fix a surging problem. Now, if what I do is if I clean a carburetor and it still runs crappy or won't start, I go get another carburetor. Tecumsehs are getting, like I said yesterday, they went out of business. You may end up buying an aftermarket carburetor, which is okay, but beware that sometimes the aftermarket carburetors do not run correctly, especially the Chinese stuff. Now the Oregons, I've had pretty good luck with those. Honda carburetors are cheap enough. I would not hesitate to buy a Honda carburetor. They're generally anywhere from $35 to $50, $60. And now they're difficult to look up. You may need some help with that. Your local dealer can help you out with that. The Kohler carburetors are much more expensive, but if it's the mower or snowblower, whatever you're working on, is a nice mower, it's worth spending $80 on a carburetor for it. Okay, Briggs & Stratton, they are a bit on the expensive side, $60, $80. That's up to you. The aftermarkets are okay. I have enough carburetors. I usually just find another used carburetor out of my collection. And if the jet, and then this jet is specific for each engine. This particular one is a U. It may fit a 5.5 or 6.5, 6.25, whatever. I usually match the jet with the engine. So if I'm using a used carburetor, carburetor kits. I've just done enough of these over the years. I keep carburetor kits for Tecumseh and Briggs & Stratton's, Hondas. If you're very careful with all these carburetors, you can get away without a carburetor kit. Now, some people may argue that, but if you're just trying to get your mower going on a Saturday afternoon, you're not going to be able to find a carburetor kit locally. Most lawnmower shops close at noon. You're probably not going to find one, and you've got to order one. So it's a couple days away. So I have enough parts generally to. That's why I keep a lot of used parts, used carburetors around, so I can rob a part and get a mower running for the weekend. Now, if you notice, like this one, this little Kohler's just had too much water in it. I had another one that was just crusty. Sometimes if you've got a lot of water damage to them, you might just toss them, go get you another mower, go get you another carburetor for them. So, but anyway, that will fix most of your problems. Now, I've got one other carburetor to show you. This is for the Briggs & Stratton's. This is off a Quantum engine, and this is off a Quattro. This is these are generally 5 horsepower on up. This is 4.5 horsepower on down. As you can see, it's built onto the tank. That's another video right there. These use a diaphragm, kind of a neat little setup, very simple. You take 2 bolts, hold them off, and hold them on, and one lever, they pop right off there, and then of course your vent. Now these other, especially the Hondas and the Kohlers, are much more complicated. Briggs & Stratton is very simple, And I don't mind Tecumsehs, but they have two rods, so they can be a little bit complicated. Now, in closing, now you notice you've got a whole bunch of different holes on this Tecumseh carburetor. Now, before you pull this off, mark the hole that the rod went through. That'll save you some hassle down the road. If you put it in the wrong hole, the engine will run at the wrong RPM. I'd say good luck, have a good time with it. Just need some air and a can of carburetor cleaner, and go to town. Anyway, that's all I've got. Cliff out.